there's a very large but contained field called philosophy. It asks itself many questions. And some of us go into philosophy because we ask ourselves those same questions, right? What is right? What is wrong? What is life? What is our perception? How do we engineer a world that is more fair? And so philosophy takes a little bit of core science, medicine, mathematics, physics. It takes a little bit of law, particularly the ethics side. It takes a little bit of, I'll say, religion, mythology, metaphysical questions. And every field, every domain that we are in, whatever job you have, has a component to that particular job that is philosophical, which is what are the core questions about this job? What are the core questions about this particular activity? Where are the risks? How do we share with the broader community involved in that job? How do we share those risks? How do we share what works? How do we put that in a framework that is not valid just today, but again, lasts for a long time? So something that you can see and you can discuss the same points over and over. And that's why when you read Nietzsche hundreds of years back, what you read right now is still relevant in many ways. And when you read Paracelsus, old style medicine, 1500s, what he says is extremely relevant today, maybe even more relevant today than it was back then. And that's what makes it, to some extent, philosophical. At the end of the day, there's a unifying philosophy called hedonism. And the word hedonism, you've heard of it in multiple contexts. It's about pleasure, right? And what is pleasure? How do we define pleasure? When you look at all the philosophies, they all come back to this. Because if we do laws for fairness, why do we need fairness? What's the point of fairness? The fairness is that there's no displeasure in the group. That my pleasure is not your displeasure, your pleasure is not my displeasure. That a pleasure today, followed by a larger displeasure tomorrow, okay, is that worth it? Is that particular pleasure today worth it? And hedonism says, well, probably not. Because when you look at the two, the net is not a net positive. Does it make sense to take a displeasure today to avoid a bigger displeasure tomorrow? Then hedonism says yes. So hedonism is this idea that all the philosophical questions we ask ourselves, whether it's a math exercise, it's a risk management exercise, whether it's a medical question, not in the term of, just the core science of it, but how do we as a group make good health for one another in the food chain, in all the discussions we've had so far. Hedonism says it is the pleasure of the group being compassion for others, but not just for others, it's also to you. So it's very inclusive, that it does not mean that you are going to whip yourself. It does not mean that you are going to be only giving. It means that the group gives to one another without having some sort of guilt about pleasure. And then, of course, hedonism looks at a very long time range, which is you look at a lifespan and you say, in that particular lifespan, I don't know what's going to happen, but based on what we know around us, what we've learned, I'm not going to take a pleasure today that is followed by a big displeasure. And then I'm going to be willing to take a displeasure right now if in the future there's a good chance that it's going to avoid some pain. And then you look at all the fields of science and all the fields of study, and you find philosophy on those particular fields, and then you look at the fact that they all lead to that one unifying philosophy called hedonism. So, take care.